Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today, continuing the Swamp Thing read-along with Swamp Thing number 34. This is, right here, you're looking at the greatest romance comic ever written. Swamp Thing we've already gone through, I think, a dozen issues at this point, maybe a little bit more. It's proven itself as an excellent horror comic, but right here, breaks the mold completely, gives us one of the best love stories in comics that I've ever read. Certainly, it's absolutely beautiful, and I cannot wait to jump into it with you guys. The cover here sets the tone. It's a John Totleben, I believe, just painting. Just Totleben, no Bissette on this one. It's Swamp Thing and Abby embracing deep within the waters of the swamp, and that's something that will be explored even further within the interiors. The issue opens with a great opening line. Abby's at the hospital visiting her husband, Matt Cable. He is in a coma with no signs of getting out of it. And we open with, "Spring came and everything in the world woke up, except him." As she's looking on, she's feeling pain. She feels an ache about his suffering, about what he went through. If hopefully you're all caught up, but he was possessed by her uncle Anton Arcane, and he was able to come through in the end and fight him off and get his redemption. But things were really sour between him and Abby already at that point, even before her uncle became involved in the mix. So she says here that she feels an ache, but not of mourning, and that she wanted to be with someone else. So she leaves the hospital to go be with someone else, to be with Swamp Thing. So right off the bat here, we're getting something a little bit different from Bissette and Totleben, because it's Stephen Bissette and John Totleben on inks, Alan Moore on the script, obviously. But this layout here, right off the bat, we get something different, because this is a spread. The image, the sequence of events is meant to be read all the way from the left here to the opposite end, the right over here. It's not a single page where we're going down and then moving to the next page and going down. It's meant to be read across. And that's going to be continually revisited throughout this issue, and they're doing it for two reasons. The first is they are slowing down the speed at which you are reading this comic, because this is not an action comic. This is not a horror comic. This is an emotionally driven comic. This is character-driven comics right here. It is about an important moment, a blossoming of the romance of Abby and Swamp Thing. And that's not something to flip through. It's not a trifle. It means a lot to these characters, and it's really important. The second reason is that it's preparing you to explore the page in a way that you're not used to previously, and you'll see why as we continue to flip through. But Abby and Swamp Thing are sitting together. She's obviously got something that she wants to say to him. First, she asks if she can pluck this flower that's growing from his body. He says, "Of course, take it." And she says, the way you look, I think I like you best in spring." Because now he's got flowers sprouting from him. He's communing with the butterflies. It's a very nice, wholesome image here. And she wants to talk to him. And so she starts to bring up that, since Matt had his accident, she's had feelings for someone else. And she's wondering if it would be wrong to have those feelings. Swamp Thing tells her, "There's nothing wrong with it. You're too young, you're too beautiful to be a widow forever. Is there somebody that you love?" She says, "Yes, very much." And she's kind of looking back at him as his hand's on her shoulder here. And the Swamp Thing tells her, "You mustn't torture yourself with pointless guilt. If there's someone that you love, then tell them." And we get a close-up of her as she says, "Yeah, well, That's, that's what I'm trying to do. And we get a great reaction face from Swamp Thing. He gets a sparkle in his eye. He purses his lips a little bit. He's surprised. He, obviously isn't expecting to hear this from Abby. And he kind of has to confirm. You mean me? She says, "For God's sakes, who else?" And she thinks she kind of ruins the moment there because she snaps at him a little bit, but she doesn't, of course. But this is an incredible line of dialogue from Swamp Thing here. So she says, "You're a plant, for God's sakes." Just saying it out loud. I mean, it's just so funny. "How could you love me?" He says, "Deeply, silently, and for too many years." And I mean, her reaction says it all. I mean, who's cutting onions in here? I mean, I'm trying to do a show. I mean, that's just beautiful. And again, we have another spread where, did we have that earlier? No, we had ads there. So we have another spread where we're reading it slowly all the way across both pages, so that we're coming back down here. And we get the incredible romantic movie moment. We get the iris over them as they share their first kiss. And it's a beautiful embrace. The sun shines on them. As she says, "Oh, it's like lime, but not as sharp." And he asks her, "Do you like lime?" She says, "It's my favorite." And I'm going to completely ruin the mood here for a second, but this reminds me, I think this movie came out after this, but if you've ever seen the movie Chopping Mall, it's a really like crummy B horror movie from the 80s. And there's like a scene in that where this girl's hooking up with her boyfriend, and she works at a pizza place in the mall. And while they're making out, he tells her she smells like pepperoni, and she gets offended. And then he grabs her back, and he's like, hey, I like pepperoni." And then like that smooths things over. This reminds me of that. It's not nearly as stupid as that, but I just felt like throwing that in there. But they are, they've confessed their love for each other. But Alec is still, he's got something else on his mind, because he tells her, "You are human. You need more from love than just the taste of lime." And she picks up on it right away. "You're talking about sex, right?" Obviously, he's talking about sex. So he's got something else in mind, because she's trying to say, like, "Look, it's not important to me as long as all the other stuff is there, as long as you want me and you care about me. Like, that's all that I need." And he says, "But there should be some kind of form of communion between us." And she says, "It doesn't have to be physical, And he says, "No, it doesn't. Wait right here." He goes into the swamp, into the waters, and he grows this tuber out of his chest. He pulls it, and he brings it to her. And she asks him, "You want me to eat that?" Because, and she talks about it here, the last time she saw somebody eat something off of Swamp Thing, it was the Floronic Man many issues ago, and it made her throw up to see it. It made her sick to see it. But she says, "Okay, but if you want me to do this, then I will do it." And so she goes ahead with it. And she takes a bite. She says, "It's got sort of like a perfumey taste, like cardamom. It's really good. Is this like a symbolic thing?" And he goes, "Not entirely." And she says, "What do you mean? Is there something else I should have?" And then we can see from these panels, the imagery starts to get a little psychedelic, and Abby's about to go on a trip. And on the next page, we are going to get what this issue is all about, and the real reason why we're getting set up with all these spread pages to train our minds and our eyes to read this comic differently. We move over, and yeah, I love this issue for this reason. This looks incredible. Alan Moore and Steve Bissette must have just sent a note to Tatiana Wood and just told her, "Have a blast. Just just have a great time with this issue. Use colors you've never really used before in ways you've never used before in this comic. Um, and she goes for it. She goes for it, and it totally pays off. And as you can see, Bissette is changing the layout here, where we're starting in the upper left as we usually do in a comic book. And instead of just reading it straight to the right, we're led to read it downward, and the panels start to shift in their positioning, and we're forced to turn the comic on its side so that we can continue. Before we do that, though, just a quick explanation. She's saying now what she's seeing. Oh, look at the swamp. It's all of fire, millions of birthday candles. And look at me, all these strands of pearly stuff. Alec, what's happened to everything? He says, you ate the fruit, Abby. You absorbed a little of my consciousness, my perceptions. She asks him, you see things like this all the time? He says, not all the time, but only when I wish to. And she starts to see just like the strands of being, like the little strands of things that make up all life. And she sees little jewels of light that are drifting inside of Swamp Thing's body. And he says, those are insects. Everything's alive. It's all made from the same stuff. And she says, I never realized the world was like this. And when we turn the page, we get this incredible layout, this incredible spread by Bissette, where I encourage you to just pause and just look at what he has put on the page here. I think while you do that, I'll just read out the narration, because it can't be beat. My words can't do it justice. Spring came and everything in the world woke up. My hand shatters the pool. 100 glass beads exploding out between my fingers. A brief anti-gravity necklace settles against my throat, collapsing, dissolving, warm as it trickles away. Below the water, the sudden cold frottage of fish skin, slick and silver against my instep. It twists, flickers, disappears. The bubbles rise. The thread lights, a blazing cat's cradle inside me, inside him. Where we touch, the fibers merge and intertangle. I am no longer certain where I end, where he begins. And it continues in that vein of her experiencing kind of all of nature all at once, becoming one with it, becoming one with him, one with Swamp Thing, seeing things as he sees it. And that idea is continued on this page. In him I ride the amber sap, oozing through miniature labyrinths. Clusters of insect eggs burn like nebulae, suspended in their unique and vine-wrought cosmos. Through him I brawl with the swamp, sopping, steaming dragonflies, stitching neon threads through the damp air surrounding me. Beyond him I wrestle the planet, sunk in loam to my elbows as it arches beneath me, tumbling endlessly through endless ink. The bark encrusts my flanks, the moss climbs my spine to embrace my shoulders. We are one creature, and all that there is in us. We even get a little Abby Swamp Thing hybrid there. We get a Swamp Thing with boobies. And on here, we get a kind of shift in the color palette again, because up here it's all green, all greens and yellows, and it's mostly that on the previous page as well. But we get a little bit more pink and red and purples here, a little bit harsher colors, and it's because they're not just one with all of the beautiful parts of nature, but also the aggressive parts, the animals that are fighting and eating each other. And she talks about that there's no contradiction in what she's experiencing of the beauty and the horror. It's just what the world is, and it's just pulsing within them. And just, I mean, you could see it. What am I going to say? You could see it. And it culminates here, and I'll read this out as well. It throbs, it breathes in the world, in its fibers. The pulse quickening, strands tighten, drawn taut, a clenched glove in my stomach. Underground, buried claws wound the soil. Savage furrows fill with moisture. A fish twists, the bubbles rise. The world pulses and shudders with life and death, with tide and magma, with me, with him. And this, I think, right here is probably, I mean, one of the nicest comic images ever composed of the two of them offset, her sweating, him just lost in this moment around this like burning heart. Just it's unbelievable. How could you expect this from a DC comic book in 1980? I mean, to give this context, they're gearing up for, here, there's an ad that I'll show you. They're gearing up for Crisis on Infinite Earths. Like, that's where DC is at this point. You know, it's not introspective like this. Even after over a year of Alan Moore on the title now, the other titles can't keep up with this kind of creativity and this kind of introspection. It's incredible. And we shift the comic back onto its proper side as Abby comes back down from the trip. And I mean, that's a this is a post-coital look if I've ever seen one. They look at each other, and she says, does this mean we're going out? And they kiss one more time against the sunset, a great silhouette of them, and just another one for good measure. This time, no silhouette, just big close-up, big pin-up. We could see all the flowers growing off of him, the vegetables. He is full of life. This is the most, I would say, full of life we've seen him since we started this run. Also like that the butterflies are also eating of the tuber. Who knows what kind of trip they're about to go on. Those poor guys. But yeah, that's it. That's the most beautiful romance comic ever written, and we're going to follow it up with something completely different. The first issue of the Nuke Face Papers, which is one of my favorite story arcs in the entire run. I'll also go back one moment to point out something here. This is an editorial from the editor, Dick Giordano, who is explaining that he got this really great proposal from Alan Moore recently for a maxi series starring the superheroes we recently obtained from Charlton. The idea is gutsy, grittily realistic, and explores aspects of the superhero never really dealt with before. Unfortunately, I can't really consider it for the Charlton heroes. For one thing, certain aspects of the plotline do things with and to these characters that would make it difficult for us to use some, if not all of them, after the series was over. Secondly, I'd already made plans, now pretty far along, to publish the Charlton heroes in tandem with some current and past DC favorites in weekly comic book format. I like the idea so much, though, that I'm going to suggest that Alan create new characters for this maxi series in place of the Charlton heroes and tell his story. It's a wonderful concept. Note, since this was written, Alan has enthusiastically agreed with my scheme and is hard at work. Dave Gibbons is slated to illustrate. With luck, it'll be a 1985 release, tentatively titled Watchmen. So that's where we are in history. Watchmen is in the works. So Alan Moore is just firing on all cylinders at this point. And look at that. And you get Ghostbusters. You get the Ghostbusters Activision game as a back ad. So that is Rite of Spring. Unbelievable, beautiful issue. I love this one. I really hope you enjoyed it too. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. Thank you for spending some time with me today. But now, it's time to get back to reading.